Today's episode is from the second annual Lawrence First and Goal virtual clinic. And in this one, Dave Shula, who is the receivers coach at Dartmouth College, talks about the difference between coaching in the NFL and college football. Coach Shula has served as the head coach for the Cincinnati Bengals. He was also a coach for the Miami Dolphins, Dallas Cowboys, and now is at the college level with Dartmouth. He is the son of legendary football coach and Hall of Famer Don Shula, and he's grown up in a family with college and NFL football as a big part of it. So I think there's a lot of insight to hear from this one. He touches on a lot of things. It's definitely one you'll enjoy. To get the entire Lawrence First and Goal Clinic replays, go to lfgf2022.coachesclinic.com.
When I was asked to present today, I thought I'd go a little different route considering my background. And, I get a lot of people when I'm out and about talking to high school coaches out when I'm out recruiting, or people in general asking me, what's the difference between coaching in college and in the pros? And, what do you like better? So I thought I'd spend a little time talking about that today. Just give you my background as to what my creds are and being able to do this. And basically, I grew up in a football family. Most of you that have followed football, at least the NFL over recent years, or going way back, would know my father, Don Shula, longtime coach at the Colts and then Miami Dolphins. And he accumulated more wins than anybody else in his time in the NFL as a head coach, and was the coach of the still, I think it's been 102 seasons that the NFL has played, and only one team has gone undefeated. And that was the 72 Doplhins, and they are very proud of that. My father passed away May 4th of 2020. He went to his grave still undefeated, as I said in his memorial service. So anyways, I grew up in that, football family. I played high school and played here at Dartmouth as a receiver and a return specialist. I was fortunate to make it 1 year with the then Baltimore Colts back in 1981 as a returner. Thought I was going to law school, but ended up helping out my dad. And then 15 years later, I was still coaching in the NFL. So I stayed with the Dolphins. I was there from the end of the 82 season through the 88 season. I went with Jimmy Johnson when he first went to the Cowboys in 89 as his offensive coordinator for 89 and 90. And then went to the Cincinnati Bengals, worked on offense with Sam Wyche in 1991, and then was named the head coach of the Bengals in 92. I held that post for 4.5 years. Got fired in the middle of the 96 season with the Bengals. Got out of the profession for 22 years, was running a franchising company called Shula's Steakhouses based out of South Florida. We had at one point 36 restaurants around the country, still up and running. Decided to back down from that, I guess, it'll be 5 years ago now, or 4 years ago. And I had stayed close to the program here at Dartmouth. Our head coach is Buddy Tevens. He and I played together and have been good friends for all that time, and our wives are great friends. And he was looking for a receiver coach just as I was, reducing my role at Shula's, and it just worked out perfectly. Come back to my alma mater. My wife also graduated from here. Our oldest son played football here, so it was great to be back. It's a beautiful place, Hanover, New Hampshire. And so I just finished my fourth year, third season as a college football coach. So after 15 years of coaching in the NFL, now I've had 4 seasons, 4 years here in college. And then also I mentioned family here. My brother Mike, longtime NFL coach, also was the head coach at the University of Alabama. So was able to get that, perspective from what it's like to coach at, at the highest of high levels in the SEC and at Bama. Mike was there before Coach Saban took over. And then all 3 of our sons, I mentioned our one that played here at Dartmouth, he ended up coaching in college at Florida Atlantic University and Illinois State University, and then was a GA at University of Miami for 11 years. He's out now in the real world. Our middle son, Chris, played at Miami of Ohio. One of his roommates was a guy named Sean McVay. So he and Sean went their own ways after finishing in their playing days at Miami, and ended up reuniting in Los Angeles when Sean got the job. Chris is, after years as a graduate assistant in quality control at Oklahoma and Ball State and Indiana, then went into quality control with the San Diego Chargers. And then when Sean got the job, he hired Chris, and he's had different jobs. He was D-line assistant with the D-line, and then outside linebackers, and then inside linebackers. And His role moving forward will be pass game coordinator and working with the secondary. He's got both the college and NFL perspective, and we were fortunate in our family to go out, most of us be able to make it out to the Super Bowl and enjoy that experience, and stayed at the team hotel and agonized through most of the game, but fortunately we're able to celebrate after. And I wake up every day and with a smile, thinking that it wasn't just a dream, that the Rams did win the Super Bowl. It's been a great year for us at Dartmouth. In the 3 seasons I've been here, and this is not because of me, my timing was very good in what Coach Stevens had put together, got great staff and been recruiting great kids. So we, in those 3 years, have been 9-1 every year. We're 27-3. We didn't get the title the first year, but then in the last 2 years, we've gone back to back and winning Ivy championships. So along with having our 4th grandson, December 23rd, Ivy title and Super Bowl championship in the family, it's been a great run these past few months. So, and then our youngest son, Matt, is a pilot now, but he started at where actually I got to meet Coach John Lose when he was defensive coordinator at Lafayette. My son was a defensive lineman for a couple of years, had some injuries, ended up transferring, and then he shot video for the University of Florida and then University of Miami and Miami Dolphins, and decided that wasn't for him, and ended up being, now he's a pilot. That's my background in, college and NFL, and you get a frame of reference from where I'm coming from. So, all right. So what I thought I would hit on here are recruiting versus drafting, what the people are like that you're dealing with, the kids versus the pros, the involvement that you have in their day-to-day life, and as well as their sporting life in college and professional life in the NFL, what the schedules are like. Dramatically different, both in season and off season, college and NFL, and then hit on a few things about the difference in the game. I did not realize when I got back into it in coaching after 22 years and only coaching in the NFL, I didn't realize the impact that the width of the hash marks would have in the game, and talk about that a little bit, passing game rules, matchups, and then just wanted to finish up with just overlying principles that are universal to being successful in both the NFL and in college, traits that I picked up first from my father and my other influences over the years in both the NFL and then here at Dartmouth, and some of the reasons that I saw success at both levels. All right, so let's get back up to the beginning here, recruiting versus drafting. So, we know that, in the NFL, if you're paying attention these days, they've got the combine is on. How that has grown since my years in the NFL is remarkable with how it's live now and the uniforms they have. And that starts recruiting, formally once the season's over. But of course, you have scouts, and every team is different in the NFL. Some teams, for example, I know the Rams, their coaches are not even at the combine, and they will go to very few workouts, on pro days on campus, where other staffs are very involved in the scouting process. I know my time with the Bengals, we had a very limited scouting department. I know that's expanded for them now, and they're obviously doing a great job. But we as coaches were very involved. So that it just depends on how your organization is set up. And the depth of the information that you get is different. You're getting it mostly from scouts that have tracked these guys while they've been in college. You get some information about their, high school days. You get some information about what their personal lives are like, but that's very different. You don't have a recruiting war, so to speak. It's, when players are available and you have the pick and you value their athletic ability and potential contribution to the team, you go ahead and take them and they become yours. And then you get them signed to a contract and they are part of your organization. On the college side, the recruiting process is, it's funny when I talk to my brother, when I talk to my sons, or especially my son, Chris, that's, coached both in college and the NFL. And the thing they bring up, the biggest difference to them is the recruiting process and not having to be a part of that when you're in the NFL. And as I found out, in my 4 years here at Dartmouth, it is all consuming 24/7, 365. With technology nowadays, your ability to reach out, whether it's via a text or a tweet or Instagram, if you're into that, or an email, there's no restrictions on that whatsoever. Whereas there are restrictions on the time of year and how many times you can call a prospect and when you can start calling that prospect. But there's no restrictions on them calling you or you communicating via social media once they get past going in before their their junior year. So it's all consuming, and you dig deep into their backgrounds. I had a conversation last night with a recruit, and one of my inevitable questions is, tell me about your family, your siblings, your mom and dad. And that becomes very relevant here, recruiting in the Ivy League, where we do not offer scholarships. All financial aid is based on need, and it's available to any student that applies here at Dartmouth or in the Ivy League. So you get to very involved, and if it's a recruit that you're going to go ahead and want to quote unquote offer, we get very involved in finding out about the financial situations that families are in, and because they have to send in their tax returns, they have to send in their W-2s, they have to explain their relationships. If it's a divorce situation, the parents that are involved in the life of the prospect, because that becomes part of the financial aid consideration and package. So you are getting very involved in somebody's life. And then from the prospect, I talked to the head coach yesterday, and tell me about this prospect. What's he like when he's not on the football field? What's he like in the weight room? What's he like in the classroom? How is he regarded amongst his peers, his classmates, his teammates? Is he a good citizen? Is he somebody that, you point to the freshman and say, do it like this guy? Is he a captain? What are his leadership skills like? So, we get very, very in depth in that process, and want to know. When I asked Coach Stevens, when I first started recruiting, first time going out 4 years ago in the spring, had not ever recruited. And I walked into his office and said, "Hey, Coach, what are the qualities of a Dartmouth football player that I'm looking for?" And I had a pad and a pen ready to take notes. And he goes, "Well, there's only one thing. We don't take any bad guys." And he phrased it a little differently, but and that's what it comes down to for us. And you got to have the qualifications academically and athletically. And I know, in talking with my brother and my sons that have coached at the the major college level, the Power 5 level, they get into that same level of detail. Their criteria for taking a prospect is different, and especially on the academic side. And what's happening to them nowadays is they're having to deal with, the kids on their social media profiles, as we do too, how they present themselves to the general public. And, people ask me now, do you think that young people nowadays get into more trouble than when you were growing up? And my answer is I think less, actually, because of all the exposure and everything that, there's cameras everywhere. People want to post this and that. And it's I think there's, a lot more scrutiny on these young people today than at my generation. And with the advent of social media. So I would say no to that. So back to the recruiting, it's all in. And once you start with a prospect, you're communicating with them in the different mediums, whether it's through Twitter or texting or phone calls or emails. We really don't do much with Instagram, at least as coaches in our program. And it's making sure that you're letting them know how much you are interested in them, presenting your college and what opportunities you can offer them. As far as opportunities go, I know, last year with the advent of name, image, and likeness restrictions being lifted, I worked down at Wake Forest, Coach Dave Clawson, and at North Carolina, Coach Mac Brown were kind enough to allow myself and other Ivy League coaches and other coaches from different programs around the FCS, mostly programs around the country, to come in. And I was able to ask both Dave and Mac, tell me about this NIL. And at that point, it was, just getting started. And both of them reacted in the same way, in that it's a game changer. It's something now that parents and guardians and these prospects that come from these big time programs, they want to know, how much can they profit from their name, image, and likeness playing at, whatever college, university that they choose to go to. Here in the Ivy League, it's has not taken as much of a role, although we see it growing. We have a few guys that have taken advantage of the program, and there's still a lot of gray area in that. If you're a school that's offering significant financial aid to a student athlete, and then they're able to procure a lucrative name, image, and likeness deal, how does that affect their financial aid program or assistance? And to my knowledge, there is not an answer from the Ivy League or from Dartmouth College about that right now. Still up in the air. But so it's an area that is changing dramatically the way that student athletes are being recruited, especially at the Power 5 level, and just added a whole new element to what was already an all-encompassing process of bringing prospective student athletes onto your campus. A lot more variables than you deal with in the NFL, for sure. All right, so next topic, let's talk about the people in the difference in coaching. What I term as kids here, as when they first come in, your 17-year-old, 18-year-olds, or, the 22, 20, 21 to 23-year-olds by the time they're gone, and versus the kind of issues you deal with in the NFL. So I guess the best way I could describe the biggest difference that stood out to me was my first spring game we had here at Dartmouth. I met more parents in that one spring game than I did in my entire career in the NFL over 15 years. It just was not a part of the relationship that you had with your players in the NFL. I knew more agents than I did family members in the NFL. And it makes sense. You're dealing with adults. Some guys have their own families. You're dealing with them from a business perspective. And, now their college eligibility is over. Now they're looking to, play the game, but also, and in most cases, more importantly, to set themselves up financially for the rest of their lives and hopefully endow themselves and generations of their families. And with the money that, a lot of these guys are getting now, you're able to do that. So, what is the motivation of those players? When you get to the great ones, the ones that end up being the all pros, it's, they're still going to compete. They're going to work their tails off for their team. But when you get into the off season and putting your team together and dealing with salary cap and getting in free agency, we as coaches, you're generally not dealing with agents, but you are affected by those agents and their dealings with the general managers and the salary cap folks that get involved with putting a team together. And decisions are made on, does a guy fit into the salary cap? There has to be a callousness there. There has to be a willingness from the team side to, part ways with a player if they don't happen to fit. And so you end up, cutting players. Typically, rosters start out in the 90s when they report to training camp throughout the off season. You have to get down to 53 and then bring back a practice squad group of guys. So, you're talking about sitting down and I did this as a head coach. My dad did it, as well as a head coach, where you call a player in and tell him that, he no longer fits, with what your organization's plans are for the future. And those are very difficult conversations. In my 4.5 years or 4 years of doing it myself, I had players that were very businesslike. They got it and shook her hand and wished you luck. Some were kind of relieved, actually, that they kind of saw the writing on the wall. It finally came, and now they were going to move on in their lives. I had other guys that literally broke down and cried and saw their dreams to be an NFL player come to an end. So in most cases, and it was a very difficult time. And that's not something you have to deal with in college for the most part. So that, much more of a business-like atmosphere. You'll have players that are making decisions about, whether they're going to practice, even playing games, due to, them viewing their futures and prioritizing longevity. The longer they're in the game, the more opportunity they have to make money and help their families. And as a coach, you understand that, but it's sometimes a little bit conflicting as to, how much effort you would like to see a guy putting out versus what actually happens. And agents will get involved in that and advising their clients, whether they should be practicing or not. So those are things that, again, not the general rule, but things that you definitely have to deal with from that perspective. On the college side, and I know my sons and my brother, at the Power 5 levels, we're very similar in that you are pretty much totally involved in these student athletes' lives, and that, making sure that they're in a good place from a mental health standpoint, You got a young person that's away from home for the first time and dealing with, homesickness when they're, younger players, and then making sure that they're progressing toward their degree. Very important here, obviously, in the Ivy League, different than a lot of the Power 5 levels where that's not so much of a point of emphasis, although I know every coach would love to have 100% graduation rate no matter at what level. The reality is that a lot of these guys are there to get to the NFL, get to the show, and they're going to do whatever it takes to do that. And sometimes that does not involve going to class or even, trying to be a high achiever in the classroom. Now, I'm not saying that's the norm, but certainly is something that they deal with. My sons were telling me about how in one situation, my son had to make sure that he would meet his player at the beginning of the class. He'd come back when he knew the class was ended to make sure the player was still in the class. And then, and I'll talk about this in a second here about discipline, about, what do you do when somebody's not doing what they're supposed to? So very involved in that, making sure that they're progressing toward their degree. Also, how you deal with parents at times is interesting. For the most part, the parents I've had to deal with have been terrific. We tell them right off the bat, you can call them and talk to me about anything except playing time. And our head coach would say the same thing. And, they have to understand that, we're here as coaches trying to do the best we can for our team and for our college and winning football games in the way that we feel we can. It may or may not involve their son being involved in it as much as they perceive them to want to be. What I tell my guys, the receivers, and I'm the receiver coach here, is look, I'm open with you. I'll talk with you about playing time and what you need to do to improve it, or how many balls are thrown to you and those kind of things. And you need to relay that to your family, not coming from me to your family. Discipline, very different in both the NFL and in college. Mostly in the NFL, you're going to invoke financial penalties, fines, where, that's not a method here in college. We have what we call a breakfast club, where a guy's not doing what he's supposed to do, whether it's, showing up on time for meetings or practices or workouts, or we find out that they're missing study hall, which we have for our young players and any player that's below a certain grade point average. And if they're not showing up for those sessions, they're not following up with meeting with the trainers when they've set up an appointment, or our academic advising team. And our strength coach handles that, being breakfast club. And it usually involves getting up at an early hour and making sure that they get a message that it's not acceptable what they're doing behavior wise. So a little bit different methods of trying to hold people accountable. And, at the end of the day, one of the keys to being successful, and I'll mention this as I wrap up my talk here, is accountability. And how you go about doing that, the methods are different, but it's a crucial factor to be successful, whether it's in the NFL or the professional level or here in college. All right, let's talk about the schedule. What's that like in season, off season? So the biggest difference is the length of the season. It varies from, we're probably the shortest, I would say, in college. We are basically from the time we start our quote unquote training camp to our last game. And in the Ivies, we're not eligible for the playoffs or even an Ivy championship game. So it's 14 weeks. I look back at my son, I mentioned was part of the Super Bowl champion Rams. From the time they started training camp to when they won the Super Bowl was 30 weeks. That's a huge difference in investment in time. And so in season, professionally, you're now they're playing, 17 games over 18 weeks. Then you have the playoffs plus preseason, 3 games, and then a few weeks before that. And it's all about football. You come in the morning at various times, divide the players' time between meetings, walkthroughs, practices, treatment. They usually feed them on site just for time efficiency. And then they're basically free at night. Now, during summer camps, they'll have meetings at night. During the season, generally not. They do have one day off a week, and then they get some time when they have a bye week where their teams cannot ask them to be a part of anything. But usually on those days off, they're doing community service or getting out and doing some outreach, charitable outreach, which is a great thing that pro teams encourage strongly their guys to get involved in their communities. In season at the college level, we're dealing with, and every school is different as to how they do it. The academic calendars are different. Some teams will practice early in the morning. Some teams practice in the afternoons, where you meet. Generally here, we start meeting at 2:30. We're out on the field at 4:15, practice until about 6:30. and that's on Tuesday, Wednesdays, Thursdays. Fridays, shortened period meeting time and practice time. Basically a walkthrough for a home game. If we're traveling, if it's a Saturday road game, we're usually traveling. Try to leave as late as we can to allow the student athletes to go to as much class as they possibly can on Fridays. Same thing on Thursday if we play a Friday night game. We bring them in, play on Saturdays and then bring them in or Friday nights. If we play Friday nights, they get 2 days off, which is nice. If they get Saturday off, then we bring them in Sunday and go through the video of the game, kind of wrap that up as a team, a workout, and then a brief workout on the field. Monday is, for most college programs, is the off day, which is a good day for students to just focus in on making sure they're going to class and catching up on their work and planning their work for the week. One thing that's probably different here in the Ivy League and at Dartmouth is, I could say that there is not a week that goes by throughout the entire year, whether it's off season or in season, where I have every receiver for every meeting and they're at every practice or workout because of academic conflicts. And the way that we handle that, and it's a good way to help them learn what it's going to be like to be responsible when they get out into the business world, is make sure that they let me know and let each of our position coaches know, what the conflicts are going to be that they're going to have during the week. Try to minimize those if we can in scheduling before the season starts or the term starts. And then, of course, if anything, pops up, then that happens. But, we want to make sure that they're responsible about understanding how important their time is with us, since we can have them 20 hours a week during the season. We can have them at this time of year in the Ivy League. It's 6 hours a week. And then in the spring, it's, I think, 12 hours a week. We want to make use of all that time that we can. And if they have a conflict, we, like I said, we try to minimize that going into it, make sure that, they don't set themselves up for a lot of conflicts when they're planning their schedule. But when they do invariably happen, make sure that they're being managed the best they can. Off season, the NFL has regulated in their collective bargaining agreement with Players Association how many workouts. I think it's like 14 workouts they can have, and they don't start till April. And that's before training camp starts. They regulate how many days training camp can be. They regulate how many days you can be in pads. And I think it's like 14 workouts in pads during the 17-week football season, or 18 weeks when you include the bye. All that is very, very regulated. Trying to keep guys healthy, and also, understanding that it's a long, long season. Let's talk about the game now. What have I seen that's different? And as I mentioned earlier, that the hash marks, I couldn't believe the effect that just having hash marks, instead of being 6 yards apart, which they are in the NFL, and basically the football's always in the middle of the field. So right and left formation, depending on what hash you're on, didn't play a whole lot of, there wasn't a whole lot of importance placed on that in your play calling. Whereas in college, it's everything, both from a defensive standpoint and how you defend the field, and then from an offensive standpoint and where you're going to attack the defense, either into the boundary. Studies show that 89% of the time the ball is on one hash or the other. So you're basically always playing from the hash, and you're deciding, and you can get pretty good indicators of how teams are going to defend you versus your formations and personnel groups, whether you're putting strength to the field or into the boundary, and how motion affects those things, both front and coverage. Much, much different way of attacking a defense. I think what's happened in college and now it's trickled into the high schools around the country is the whole, run pass option games, the RPOs, that you're seeing all these quarterbacks being able to execute and basically spacing the field, giving the quarterback, a read as to whether he's going to hand off or keep it himself or throw the ball, all within the same play. And that now, with those quarterbacks coming out of the high schools and the colleges that employ those systems, you're seeing those guys, in teams in the NFL do that. Certainly with Tyler Murray and a lot of these great quarterbacks with the Ravens, you're going to see more and more of those guys coming in, because that's the systems that they're coming from, the successful system. So, the game is changing in that way. Also, the passing game rules. Basically in the NFL, once a receiver gets past 5 yards down the field, they're not supposed to be touched or contacted in any significant way that's going to restrict them in any way. That is not the case in college. That was a big change for me as well. I mean, you have to work harder on your releases, and then in keeping hands off of you anytime you step foot on the field in college, no matter where you are on the field. And that actually is great training for guys. Now you have superior, obviously, athletes in the NFL and how they're able to track guys and stay with them. But there's not as much physicality involved as far as actually having to use your hands and your shoulders and hips to, separate yourself from a defender, no matter where you are on the field. In college, so much different. And then matchups in the NFL and college, very similar. Matchups become a little bit more important in college because there's a bigger disparity in the talent level of the guys you're going against. In other words, if you can get your third receiver matched up on an outside linebacker, a nickel guy playing the nickel position, or a safety, the disparity in their athletic ability is different than in the NFL. But that is also a great strategy in the NFL, where you're looking to match up offensively against lesser talents on defense. And, you could see that through, what obviously I follow the Rams and what they do and how they move their guys around and put them in different positions, literally move them at the snap to create matchups that they know they can take advantage of. And I think that's part of what every NFL team is doing as well. And we do it, here at Dartmouth and throughout the college game. So, it's become a matchup game, taking over strategy and ways of being effective, with the football going down the field. My overlying principles, my conclusion here, and this is something that, these are traits that, I picked up, living with my father and watching him coach, and then actually having the opportunity to coach with him for 7 years in Miami. And then, what a lot of the great coaches have done in history through the NFL and also in college. And then, now that I've been here at Dartmouth and seeing how Coach Stevens and our coaches, what we value in the recruiting process and the type of people that we want to bring in, be successful, and then how to be successful, once they get here, and develop players and the traits that are consistent, both with guys in the NFL and guys in college. Starts out with intelligence, smart football players, guys that are intuitive, can pick things up quickly, apply what they learn in the classroom or on video to actions on the field. And it's interesting here, obviously in the Ivy League at Dartmouth, we have a lot of smart guys. Everybody's smart. But there are smarter football players than others. And that ability, that's whatever that is in our brains, to be able to take that, what you learn by memory from a book or of watching a video and how to translate that into actions on the field. It's different. So having football smart players is important. Obviously talent, you have to have a certain size, the position that you play, speed, strength, physicality, what kind of athletic ability they have, that's all important. And then team-oriented players. If you watched any of the post-game comments from the Rams in listening to Aaron Donald and Matthew Stafford and Andrew Whitworth, their veteran left tackle, 40-year-old tackle, their key players, Cooper Kupp, they all talked about how important it was for them to help someone. They mentioned somebody else or a group of guys. Von Miller, same thing. Von Miller talking about how happy he was to win it for Odell Beckham Jr. and Matthew Stafford, how proud he was to be a part of a team that won for Andrew Whitworth and Aaron Donald. And Aaron Donald talking about, how great it was. And I've been fortunate to visit the Rams facility when you go in the building, and they had this a lot on their Super Bowl paraphernalia around their team hotel. It says, "It's we, not me." And guys that are focused on making it about their teammates and not about themselves, and how that creates a positive environment. And that's something that, we stress here. I know it's not unique to our program, but it's been a definite game changer for us in that, we work hard with our guys I tell my guys, receivers, I said, we're receivers, right? And I steal the phrase from the Bible. It's in the giving that we receive. And if you can go into a game with a mindset, you're going to do whatever it takes to help our team win, whether as a receiver, whether we block 50 times or we run 50 pass routes and make opportunities to make plays, that's what's the most important. The next overlying principle, paying attention to details, and then accountability. It's the little things that make a difference. My dad was a real stickler for making sure that his guys were practicing the way that they needed to play. And as a result, his teams were the year in and year out were the least penalized in the league. And then when they don't do those things in practice or in a game, then has to be accountability that goes along with that in some form of discipline and making sure that those things don't happen again. The old adage, the team that makes the fewest mistakes is generally the team that's going to win, not the team that makes all the big plays. And, and that was a hallmark to my dad's success and something that, has trickled down to me and many programs, again, universal to college or NFL success. And then the last one, not necessarily in any order here, but, having passionate coaches and players. This cannot feel like a job to you. If you're at the college level, the high school level, the pro level, and it feels like you're going to work, it's your job, you're in the wrong profession. This game demands too much time, too much emotional and mental investment for you to be not passionate about winning, about helping young men develop into young adults that can go on and be successful in life at the college level while working to win, championships, helping kids progress toward graduation, and at the pro level, building a team, working toward a world championship, but doing it within the rules and such. And all that takes a heck of a lot more time and effort and, like I said, both mental and emotional effort to be successful than you could ever rationalize as far as amount of time goes. A lot of people don't understand, they think when the season's over that, football coaches all go off and, go to the beach for the next whatever number of months and realize all the time that's invested in that. And like I said, if you feel that it's work, then that's probably not what you should be doing. It's such a great game. And I found out myself in the traits that you learn in team sports and football in particular, and how it can help you be successful in business when I was out my 22 years out with Shula Steakhouse's franchising company. So that, you have to have passion and got to be totally invested and that translates to success both at the college and the NFL level.
Thanks again for listening to the Coaching Coordinator Podcast. Follow all we're doing at coachingcoordinator.com and follow me on Twitter at Coach K. Grabowski. And remember to get the replays from this clinic. It helps support a great cause for pediatric brain tumor research and cancer services. Get those at lfgf2022.coachesclinic.com.